In this Diablo 4 video, I'll be helping you to understand how the Barbarian class changes for Diablo 4 patch 2.0, which is coming with a Vessel of Hatred expansion on October 8th, and give you an easy overview of what to expect for your builds and gameplay. Patch 2.0 is adding one new active skill, one key passive skill, and 4 regular passes to the Barbarian, as well as a new Paragon Board. On the itemization side, we'll be getting new uniques and legendary aspects as well. Before we get into the specifics of Barbarian though, let me tell you about some huge changes coming to the game itself. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, and we'll have full detailed coverage of all these changes in a future video. For now, let me tell you about the most important ones. First of all, max level has been reduced to 60 from 100, and players will begin receiving Paragon points once they reach this level. These points can be used on any level 60 character on your account. This not only means that you can gain Paragon points for your Barbarian while playing like your Druid, for example, it also means that you will have an additional 10 skill points to allocate into your build, gained from levels 51 through 60, for a total of 69 skill points in patch 2.0, up from 59 previously. Additionally, stats like armor, health, and damage have been drastically reduced in order to simplify the game and make mathing easier for players. This doesn't result in a nerfing of your character, it's more of a back-end change that is reflected in new numbers in your UI. Don't freak out if you see your weapon no longer deals the same damage, it will still be as effective as it was before. And lastly, the difficulty system of Diablo 4 is changing, and there are now new torment levels along with new difficulty levels, much like there were in Diablo 3. Regular difficulty levels will be unlocked by advancing your character, but torment levels will need to be unlocked through an endgame activity called the Pit of Artificers, which is much like Rifts in Diablo 3, which are randomized dungeons essentially with a boss at the end. This shouldn't change the way you play the game fundamentally, and hopefully allows players to customize their preferred difficulty a bit easier. So moving on to Barbarian specifics, let's take a look at the skills first. The Barbarian has been granted a new active skill called Mighty Throw, which hurls your weapon, dealing 60% weapon damage upon impact and sticking in the ground. Once in the ground, the weapon will start pulsating, dealing 15% weapon damage every second for 4 seconds in a small area. The damage is only dealt upon impact, and it takes about 1 second to activate even when used at melee range, which seems kind of slow when first used, but multiple instances of this skill can be stacked, so doing multiple throws on a single spot will create a pulsating death circle, which synergizes great with other Barbarian skills that pull enemies together. The enhancement of this skill increases your attack speed by a massive 25% while a thrown weapon is out, while the upgrades give you 2 different approaches on how to use this skill. Fighter's Mighty Throw creates the opportunity to fight inside the pulsating area, sustaining yourself by creating barrier while also dealing more damage with the additional pulse. I can't wait to try this out on our old Juggernaut build. Warrior's Mighty Throw, on the other hand, allows you to essentially perma-stun enemies, since you can spam this skill as long as you're generating enough fury, which on paper sounds insane. A new key passive has been introduced called Barbed Carapace. Barbarians have a ton of active and passive skills that synergize with Thorns. This key passive will open up the possibility for a ton of viable Thorn builds, as it directly deals damage to close enemies without requiring you to take damage yourself, which is not ideal in most cases. The first thing that comes to mind is an improved version of the Whirlwind Barbarian, as you'll be dealing damage both with Whirlwind and with Thorns, while you constantly spend Fury and use Shouts to renew the unhindered buff. The other passive skills are kind of straightforward on what they do, but most are a welcome addition to fix some issues that persist on staple builds. Belligerence increases your damage for 4 seconds after using a basic skill, but Barbarian basic skills remain unused for the most part, as they don't contribute much to staple builds. Increasing your overall damage after using them might create some synergies, like starting with Lunging Strike and then combining other skills for increased damage, however. Heavy Hitter increases your ultimate skill damage. While 45% seems like a big buff to the ultimate damage, you still need to wait for their long cooldowns. It will be most beneficial for builds that use ultimate as finishers in big fights. Warpath increases your damage for 4 seconds after overpowering. The overpower mechanic is very fun, but you usually lack damage between the combo buildups. This will give a nice little boost to clear off any enemies while you're building up to the next overpower attack. Impressible makes it so that when you cast a weapon mastery skill, you fortify yourself for a percentage of your maximum life. This is a passive option to quickly build up Fortify using weapon masteries, which can really help with build efficiency. Moving along to changes to the Barbarian skills and trees. The Barbarian has had multiple buffs and nerfs to its skill trees since release, so if you're a returning player, you'll probably want to check what has changed in regard to your favorite skills and make adjustments to your builds based on those changes. However, the newest patch brings changes to Frenzy and Ground Stomp. The Fury generation of Frenzy has increased from 4 to 7 and damage from 13 to 15%. The enhanced version that previously generated 3 flat Fury will now instead reduce the Fury cost of your core skills by 25%, which is a massive buff. The Combat Frenzy upgrade that previously provided you with damage reduction for each stack of Frenzy will now provide a little less damage reduction, but will also increase your movement speed, greatly increasing mobility, while the Battle Frenzy upgrade got a 1% attack speed increase as well. The increased mobility in combination with the reduced cost of core skills will probably give Frenzy a spot in combo-style builds. Taking a look at Ground Stomp, the base damage has been increased from 9.5% to 20%, but the most noticeable change is on the enhancement, which now generates 60 Fury, which was previously the complete effect of the Tactical Ground Stomp upgrade, on top of the 1 second increased stun duration. The Tactical Ground Stomp upgrade will now make your Ground Stomp into a brawling skill that deals 800% increased damage to bosses and applies vulnerable for 4 seconds. The Strategic Ground Stomp upgrade will now reduce ultimate skill cooldown by 4 seconds, previously 2, up to 12 for each enemy that was hit. While these changes are already major on their own, Ground Stomp is also getting a massive buff thanks to the new legendary Paragon Board node, Force of Nature, which I'll explain a little bit later in this video. Taking a look at Hamstring, this was a must-have for most Barbarian builds, as you would get a guaranteed slow effect on healthy enemies by just applying Bleed, triggering all the slow damage modifiers. The updated version feels like a massive nerf, providing a 15% chance to slow healthy and injured enemies by 70% each time they deal damage. And while the effect itself is stronger, and you can now apply it to injured enemies, it removes the guaranteed trigger, which made it so popular. Moving on to Slaying Strike, similar to Hamstring, a must-have on most Barbarian builds thanks to its flat damage to injured enemies. Slaying Strike has had its damage reduced from 8% to 5%, a massive and flat nerf. And Unconstrained, the key passive originally enhancing Berserking, increased its duration by 5 seconds and providing a 60% flat damage bonus. The new version maintains the 60% damage bonus, but replaces the 5-second increased duration to the always active Berserking with 25% physical damage reduction bonus, as long as you are below 65% life. This change opens up the possibility for many glass cannon builds with high risk, high reward, focusing around Fortify, Barriers, and Berserking. Next, we'll talk about changes to Barbarian on Paragon Boards and Glyphs. In patch 2.0, players will now also only be able to equip 5 Paragon Boards at a time, including your base board, so you cannot just ninja through a board for one node and out really quickly, and instead players will need to utilize their boards wisely. However, each class has gained a new board for a total of 9 boards, up from 8, and some rare nodes have changed. And on top of that, players can now earn a total of 300 Paragon points, up from 200, which should allow for a serious power increase across all builds. Glyphs have also seen a significant change. They now no longer improve via experience, but instead level up by completing levels of the Pit of Artificers and trying to improve them at the end, again, much like Diablo 3. The higher level of Pit you complete, the higher chance you have of improving your Glyph. Glyphs also now go up to level 100, further expanding their power, and the higher level they are, the more difficult it becomes to improve them without going to higher and higher levels in the Pit of Artificers. The new Paragon board for the Barbarian is called Force of Nature, and its legendary node is directly tied to Ground Stomp, as it greatly enhances the Earthquake you create by using it in combination with the Earthquake aspect. As a reminder, the Earthquake aspect enhances Ground Stomp, creating an earthquake on the ground that deals physical damage over 4 seconds, and increases the damage you deal by 30% while you stand on it. With the complementary changes to Ground Stomp, it will make an amazing tool against bosses and elite packs, combining multiple effects and buffs into a single skill. Generating Fury, stunning enemies, dealing massive flat damage, dealing massive AoE damage over time, increasing your damage while fighting inside the Earthquake, and can be used to trigger Berserking if you use Tactical Ground Stomp with Battle Fervor. As an alternative to Ground Stomp, Earthquakes can also be created by using Aspect of Volcathos, which creates an Earthquake on the place where you land with your leap, but instead of providing increased damage, it provides damage reduction, but you can use both and they stack. Overall, I think that this board is a great addition to the Barbarian's arsenal, and I will definitely be trying out some possible builds once the expansion hits. Next, we'll take a look at Barbarian legendary aspects, the new ones, as well as changes. Remember that the Codex of Power was changed in Season 4 and now stores legendary aspects of the highest roll you've obtained for that particular aspect. You can also use the Codex of Power as many times as you want on items, provided you have the gold and materials. If you've not played in a while, you should probably head over to your storage, pull items you've been saving for a rainy day, and salvage many of them as soon as possible at the blacksmith in order to unlock higher rolls at the Codex of Power and free up valuable inventory space. 3 aspects were changed with this patch. The first is Aspect of Bull Kathos. It's had its damage increased by 30%. The Earthquake aspect has had its damage increased by 30%. And the Aspect of Giant Spot a significant nerf, as its cooldown per enemy hit was reduced from 2.5 to 5 seconds to 1.3 to 2.5 seconds, and maximum reduction reduced from 9 to 7 seconds. All in all, though, you can see that these changes align with the improvements to Ground Stomp, as these 2 aspects will more than likely be used with a Ground Stomp build. There are also 2 other new aspects added, Aspect of Shattering Steel and Aspect of Flaming Rampage. Neither of these seems particularly great, though I could see some very niche charge builds using Aspect of Flaming Rampage. The new class unique item is called Ugly Bastard Helm, and this helm seems amazing and obviously aimed for a fiery Berserker build, which I will most likely be making if I ever get my hands on it. So what does all this mean for the Barbarian in Diablo 4 as of patch 2.0? The Barbarian was the first class I heavily invested in when playing Diablo 4, and it was because of how amazing it felt to decimate enemies with brute force. I'm sure most of the Barbs out there share the same excitement to just go all out, shout and charge at enemies with our full arsenal, and the Vessel of Hatred expansion will provide us with even more tools to achieve that goal. The new Mighty Throw skill and the Ground Stomp updates will allow Barbarians to effectively deal with big crowds of enemies without relying on small, precise finishers like we used to. Barbarians that like to fight face to face will now have a legitimate option to use Thorns without having to rely solely on enemies attacking them, and those who enjoy the thrill of low health in combination with the Fortify mechanic will be able to achieve this goal with the overhaul to the Unconstrained Key passive. I think that the new changes to the Paragon boards and the increased amount of available skill points will open up a lot of new possibilities and viable Barbarian builds. So that rounds up our introduction to the 2.0 Barbarian in Diablo 4 that's coming with the Vessel of Hatred update on October 8th. I'm very excited to try all these changes and try many new builds and even some old ones that were not possible at the time. As always, you can find our builds on the blog at Fextralife and make full use of our interactive map and wiki to keep track of where to get all items. We've already been working on the expansion content, and it is shaping up nicely. So what do you make of the new Barbarian changes? Will you be playing a Barbarian at the 2.0 launch of the game with the expansion, or are you going to go jump into the new Spiritborn class? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.